Hello, everyone, and welcome to the year-end webinar for 2024. My name is Dana Weber, and we have some new things that'll we'll go over this year, but we'll also go over some of the basics to refresh your memory. If you have questions later, you can always call us into the office or email us at support@jobcost.com. So we know that this can be a little confusing year-end things, and we are more than happy to help you, especially with some of the new things going on this year. So I am going to get out of here and pull up my year-end instructions. Okay, so to start with, you should have received an email with these instructions on how to close out the year for 2024. This is what I'm going to go over today. So feel free to open them up on your own and follow along with me if you like. You can, make whatever notes you'd like to. If you did not get that email, but would like to receive emails like this, let me know. You can send an email again to support@jobcost.com, and I can add you to our email list. However, these instructions, as well as our emails that we send out, are typically available on our website as well. So you can go to jobcost.com and then click the news button, and the year-end instructions are right here if you needed to re-download them. So that's where you can always find them. Soon, we will also be sending out an email regarding the upcoming visual contract update for the revised 1099 miscellaneous form and the updated 1095C electronic file. So just be on the lookout for that email. All right, so I'm going to start here looking at our reminder that we have. As another reminder, if you have 10 or more combined tax forms, which means the W-2 and 1099 combined, you have to file electronically. Meaning if somehow, as an example, you have 9 W-2s, but only one 1099, that's 10 combined files. So you would have to file electronically. I believe that everyone on this call falls under that, and it wouldn't surprise me if next year they also lower that number even further. So unfortunately, whether you like it or not, the electronic filing is here to stay. So at the beginning of our instructions here, we have some links that you can click on for information about the different portals that you use to file the different forms. That's what these blue and underlined text is. These are all links that you can click on. So each of these three forms, the W-2, 1095s, and 1099s, each has a different portal that you will use to file. And each portal uses their own transmitter control code, or TCC. The TCC code from last year, it will still work. However, we are recommending that you check your logins and your TCC status as soon as you can. You might want to do this after we finish the webinar. It might be a good reminder for you, because even if you either did not receive the TCC code last year or somehow that status has changed, you will have to apply for a new code. And after you apply for the code online, that code is sent to you via snail mail. So it can take up to 2 weeks for it to arrive, and the delays will only get longer the closer it gets to filing deadlines. So that's why we're really highlighting it here, to stress that we want you to check that everything is working properly as soon as you can. So again, I would strongly recommend, making a note that when we're finished with this webinar, you just want to take a look and check your statuses on everything. All right. So looking at the step numbers 1 and 2, we recommend that you review your last year W-2, 1099, and 1094, 1095Cs to refresh your memory of any special circumstances that needed to be addressed and see if you will have something similar to file this year as well. You may not need to report all those special earnings, but if you had to report group term life insurance, sick pay, auto pay, or any other special earnings, you will need to enter special time cards for those special earnings. If you're not sure whether something requires special reporting or not, please check with your accountant. And once you get those instructions from your accountant, we can help you enter it into the payroll system. Step 3 here explains that if you have any of those special items, again, like group term life insurance, auto usage, and or taxable third-party sick pay for 2024, and you have not been including those items in gross wages throughout the year, you need to do this by entering time cards before the last payroll. Or, excuse me, you need to enter the time card before the last payroll or in your last payroll of 2024. Whichever you choose, it does need to be done before you close out the calendar year. And I'm going to stress that a lot because, please contact us if you have any questions or concerns about entering anything. We are here to help and we want to make your year end as painless and stress-free as possible. Okay. Moving on to the next page, step 4. Speaking of stress, step 4 tends to cause the most headaches. So please take your time figuring out when your last payroll of the year will be. The government requires you the government requires that reported earnings they're based on the check date. And I'll say that again. The earnings go based on the check date, not the payroll date. The check date, which means that your last payroll for 2024 must have a check date of 2024. And here we have an example of a last payroll in 2024. In this example, pay periods end on Saturday and the checks are dated the following Thursday. So, since the last Thursday of 2024 is on December 26th, that means that your last payroll is on the 21st or check dated on the 26th. And continuing on, if you want your payroll for December 28th, which is the next week, to be reflected in 2024, again, the check date must be dated before or on December 31st. Any check dated in 2025 will not be included in the earnings for 2024. So if you want to do something like that, please call us. Again, we are here to help and it helps everyone out if you contact us to go over these steps and confirm it's correct before continuing on closing the year. Okay, step 5 points to the year-end calendar checklist, and we have that on page 3 of these instructions. You'll print and review those reports on the checklist, and once you're absolutely 100% sure that you do not have any further payrolls for 2024, you can close out that payroll for the year. So I'm going to show you how you get there in my test company here in VC. The data that I have is not the best, but I'll at least show you the steps that you can get to. So you're going to go to admin, payroll, year end, and then back up year end employees, 0 year-to-date totals, and clear 1095-C information. Once you do this step, you cannot reverse it. And we also cannot reverse it. So that's why I'm really stressing to remember that the government earnings are based on the check date. So if you did this step and then realized that your next payroll needed to go into 2024, it's going to cause a lot of headaches. So again, once you are only when you are completely, absolutely positive that there is no more earnings that need to be reported in 2024, should you run this step. In this example, I'm actually not going to run it right now because I'm going to show you how to enter in a special check later in the webinar. And I want that to go into 2024. So I know I'm not quite ready to run this step. But continuing on, selecting that step, this backup year-end employees step, it zeroes out the year-to-date totals and creates that backup. And by backup, I mean that it creates a history file. I can show you here if we go to File, Payroll Employee History. So see, I have 2023 and 2022. I don't have 2024 because I have not run that backup year-end employee step yet. But once I do, I'll have a history file for 2024. Running that step also on the employee files. This is a bad example, but it zeroes out any employee information here. If you had any numbers in here, running that step zeroes everything out. All right, I'm going to go back to our instructions here. So that step is for the calendar year. We also have a similar zero out step for the fiscal year, which is in the same place, admin, payroll, year end, 0 employees, fiscal year totals. If your fiscal year also ends on December 31st, we have that fiscal year checklist to follow in the instructions on page 4. If your fiscal year does not end on December 31st, you can hold off doing that checklist until your fiscal year comes to a close. Once you have processed all of the payroll for 2024 and zeroed out the employee totals, you will still then need to change the tax tables before you calculate any checks for 2025. You'll find the tax tables in admin, payroll, tax tables, and we have federal and state. We just sent a email this morning with the tax tables for the federal information. We anticipate that the Illinois numbers will come out closer to the end of the year. That's typically when they do that. So we will send out another email once we get that information. Again, it'll probably be closer to the year. I believe it's usually at the very beginning of January. So we will, again, we will send out an email once that's ready. And then another reminder that I want to give is if you are selecting the state, you want to make sure you use the binoculars and pull up the correct state that you needed to change your tax tables to, because it will default to possibly Alaska or something else. And you just want to make sure that you're changing information for the correct state. So in this case, it would be Illinois, but don't pay attention to these numbers because they're not quite correct for this year yet. All right. Step 7 mentions that the 1094, 1095C forms. So please contact your accountant to find out if you will need to file these forms. And if you need to file them, you can let us know. And we can make sure that you have all of the correct reports that you need in order to file this. And also, here's another reminder about the TCC codes. And I will cover these forms in detail more later in the webinar. Step 8 explains that the Illinois Department of Revenue requires electronic filing, so they no longer accept any paper filing. And this year, they have a new way to upload the W-2s. If you have filed with Illinois in the past, you're probably familiar with My Tax Illinois. That is now where you'll go to file. And luckily, you'll actually use the same file that you use when you upload the W-2 to the IRS. You can create that file once you've done the zero out step for 2024. So that is created in Reports, Payroll, Year End, and then this EF W-2. EF is electronic filing, W-2. So again, this form, or this file rather, is used for both the IRS and for Illinois. You just want to make sure that you have the correct year and the correct Social Security limit. Once you click OK, it will save a file in your payroll directory. And if you can't find it, let us know. But when you say OK, it will show you a path where the file was saved. Going back to the instructions here, we do have a link, another link that you can click on that will explain everything about uploading to My Tax Illinois. It sounds pretty easy to me, but again, if you have any questions, we're here to help. If you scroll down to where it says navigation, these are the steps that you're really interested in. What you'd need to do is just go to the My Tax Illinois homepage, scroll down to the bottom, and look for this here, this non-login return or report. And you want to click Submit Bulk W-2 1095 file. You don't have to even log into My Tax Illinois. You should just be able to upload that file once you have it created. You'll just need to type in the relevant information, click Next, and upload that file. So it looks like it should be pretty simple. And again, we're all kind of hoping that it goes pretty seamlessly this year. All right. Moving on to page 3, which is our year-end checklist. So once you are done with the last payroll of the year, please print these reports and review them. Once you print the instructions, or excuse me, once you print the reports, number 6 on the instructions has that backup year-end employees and 0 calendar year-to-date employees step. And as another reminder, once you run that step, you can't go back. So, like I said, I'm really stressing it this year. please check and confirm that any check you want to have in 2024 is dated in 2024 before you close out. Then once you've zeroed out the year-to-date totals, you can change the tax tables for federal and state. And then you can enter in your first payroll of 2025. The accounts payable and accounts receivable do not need to be closed the same time as payroll. Only if you're ready to close accounts payable, accounts receivable, job cost, and general ledger should you follow the rest of the steps here on our checklist. We have the fiscal year checklist on page 4. As I mentioned before, your fiscal year end could be the same as your calendar year, or it could be different. When you run the backup and zero out steps for payroll, it only zeroes out the calendar year numbers. On the employee year to dates, there are different columns for the calendar and for the fiscal year. So if we look here, we have these two columns on the left-hand side are the calendar, and the ones on the right are the fiscal year. So when you run that first backup and zero out step, that will only zero out the information on the calendar side. If your fiscal year ends at the same time as the calendar year on December 31st, you'll run that fiscal year end zero out step, and that will clear this out, the fiscal year columns. If it's not, you're going to wait until your fiscal year is coming to a close before you run the fiscal year end checklist. Okay. On page 5 of the instructions we have, it mentions about entering special earnings into visual ContrAcct throughout the year. So if you have already been doing this, entering time throughout the year to record these special earnings, then you don't have to do anything extra. But if you have not recorded those earnings throughout the year, you will have to enter a time card to record those special earnings. And on page 6, we have an example on how to do that with one entry. This is just an example for cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. We do have instructions on how to enter other special earnings or bonus checks. So please just email us if that is something that you will need help with. Again, we are here to help you, and we want to make sure that this year end goes smoothly for everyone. So it's not bothering us to give us a call. Okay, so I'm gonna go along these steps and show you how you can make one entry to record the amount of the this cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. So we're gonna go through this one together. Step 1 is explaining that you will need a clearing account if you don't already have one. We go into File, General Ledger Accounts. I know I do have one in here, and that it is 124 listed as clearing. So this one is mine. Most of you will already have a miscellaneous or a clearing account, but again, if you don't have one, you will need to create one. Then next in admin, payroll deductions, you can either add or find the deduction that you need to enter in. In this case, I know Mine is the here, cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. When you create this deduction, the clearing account goes in the GL account ID box. So in this case, minus 124. The W-2 box should be 12, and the W-2 code should be DD, dog, dog. And again, we have that information here. That's in step 2. If anything needs to be excluded, please check any of these appropriate boxes. Once you've set up the deduction, we're going to then check the debit table by going into Admin, Payroll, Debit Accounts. You have to have your miscellaneous or clearing account on your debit table in order to use that account on your time card. So I just have this listed here. It's a labor account, but for everyone else, you would have the rest of the information filled out accordingly for your different companies. Once everything is set up correctly, then you would need to add the deduction to your employee file on the employee deduction tab. I'm going to use John Adams as an example. Here we go. So I'm going to the deduction tab. Here is the deduction here, employee health or EMP health, excuse me. The type will be amount. The frequency is every. And the amount that you need to deduct will be entered into this amount column. So I'm going to put in $7,000. And since I am only entering this as one time card to reflect the earnings throughout the entire year, my maximum is going to be that same dollar amount that I put in the amount column, 7,000. That way, when I run this time card and check, the maximum will be reached automatically. We're going to leave the accumulated and year-to-dates as 0. So now I'm going to save. And I'm going to exit out of here. Now that we've saved, I can enter in a time card for that employee. Just going to use pay period of today. And I'm going to start over. This is one I did yesterday to test. So Adams, John Adams, there we go. Okay. The union field should be blank, so I'm going to blank that out. Day of the week is going to be N for non-tax. The start and end date should be the dates covered. So in this case, I'm going to put in the whole year, 12/31/24. And the job and phase should also be blank. The GL account is your clearing account. So in my case, that's 124. And then in the non-tax amount, I'm going to enter in the cost of the health coverage that I want to show on the W-2, which is going to be the $7,000. All right, I'm going to save that time card. And now I'm going to calculate checks as normal. For 12/19, going to click OK. Then next, you're going to go to Review Void Checks. And here's our check that we made for John Adams. Anything that was, if there were any information in state and federal amounts, you would want to bring that down to 0. In this case, it's already $0, but we can see that the net pay is $7,000, and that's not quite correct. So if I look down below, I don't see the deduction that I want for this particular check. So if that happens for you, all you have to do is click on Add Deductions, and here it pops up, EMP Health. Going to say OK. And now in the amount column, I'm going to enter in the dollar amount that I put in the non-tax time card, and then going back even further in the amount column that I created on the deduction tab. So that is $7,000. Now we can see that the deduction here is listed as $7,000, and the net pay is also listed as 0, which is correct. We want that $0 check, but this $7,000 will now show the correct amount on the W-2. To save it, and then once everything looks correct, then you just print your checks like normal. And again, those instructions are all here on page 6. That is for entering the cost of employer-sponsored health coverage with one entry to record that amount for the year. Again, we do have instructions for other special earnings. Just let us know if that's something that you need. Okay, so moving on to the next page is printing the W-2 forms. After you finish reviewing all of your reports and your payroll for the year, if everything looks correct, then you're ready to print your W-2s. The W-2 totals report should be reviewed before you print your W-2s, and it is part of the calendar year checklist. You can print those reports as many times as you like. So we would need to go into Reports, Payroll, Year End, and then W-2 totals. When you are printing your W-2 totals, you just want to double check that you're selecting the correct year, as there are some possible places where you can change it. The current year field is always going to show your current payroll year. When you zero out your payroll, it moves the current year forward by 1. Since I haven't zeroed out yet, because we were putting in that special time card, my current year is still set to 2024. But once I do zero out, the current year will move to 2025. So if you do need to change the year that you're printing, you're going to leave your current year alone, but you're going to select a different year from the drop-down menu. I am going to select 2022 because I know I have some W-2s in that particular year to show you. And you can see once you select that year, your current year is now grayed out and I can't do anything with it. So you just want to double check that you're changing the correct year. Then next you'll enter in the Social Security limit. I'm just going to put in, I think that was last year's number, even though I'm running this for 2022. This is just an example. So your year will be 2024. Then I'm going to click OK to run this for all employees. And here we go. Okay, so this report will show the wages for each state and local separately. So this first page that I have here is showing Illinois. We can see up here, it says for Illinois. And the second page has Indiana. If I go one more page, this is my local county in Indiana. On the last page of the report, it does tell me the number of W-2s that I have for the year. And that number for me is 16. So even with this small number, I would need to file electronically. And another thing to keep in mind is that if you are filing electronically, you no longer need to file a W-3 form. So we have taken anything related to W-3s off of our checklist, and you may have noticed that we do not offer those forms on the order list this year, and that's why. So again, if you're filing, which I believe everyone on this call will be filing electronically, you will not need to file the W-3 anymore. But speaking of forms, you probably also noticed that we are no longer doing the pre-printed forms for W-2s. Instead, what we're using is called a 4UP form, 4UP. And the blank forms look similar to this if you haven't gotten them already. So what it will look like is each of these 4 different sections is a different W-2 copies printed on a single piece of paper. And the dotted lines here are the perforated sections of the paper. So I'll show you. I'm going to exit out of here. When you are printing your W-2s to paper, to these 4UP forms, we'll be using Crystal reports instead of going through printing out the W-2 forms here. Instead, this year, you'll be going to Reports, Crystal Reports Viewer, and then you'll select your PR IRS W-2 print 4-part form 2024. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll make sure that soon we will have this report ready for you. We anticipate it to be somewhat around the same time as our year-end update is available. So we would anticipate to do the update and upload your forms as well. And we'll make sure that you know where the report is so you can find it. And we'll just double check that you make sure you know how it works. So I'm just going to click OK so that you see an example here. To run for all employees, I'm just going to leave this here at 1. I'm going to click through here. This shows Z, so that if I leave those as is, that means I'm going to run for all employees. The Social Security limit, 600. And I'm going to put in 2022 because that's where I have all my W-2s in that year. So now it's loaded. We can see this is an example for Dana's Test Company for John Adams. And this is one page, but it has all the different copies of the W-2, and this will be on one piece of paper. If we go to the next page, this is John Quincy Adams, different John Adams. This is the next page. So this is how it's going to look when you print. So as I mentioned, it is going to be on just one piece of paper for each employee. Once you're ready to print, you can click on the printer icon here and select your desired printer. So as you can see, the lines and boxes for everything is going to automatically be pulled in because of the crystal report. So that's why we can print directly onto this seemingly blank piece of paper. Everything is going to be automatically coming from the crystal report. So that means that there won't be any alignment issues like we've had in the past. However, we are still recommending that you print at least one of the forms to regular paper before using your 4-up forms, just to make sure that you don't have any problems printing anything. So you know which way that your paper should be loaded into the printer, or maybe there's something with the ink cartridges, just so that you don't waste any of the forms. Okay. And to close out of here. And we do have that listed here on the instructions. And again, once we install those crystal reports for you, we'll show you, make sure that you can find it. Everyone will most likely have a different directory where their crystal reports are. So we'll make sure that you can find those reports once they are uploaded. All right. So moving on to page 8 and the 1095Cs. The 1095 forms will print from the employee history, which means that they can only be printed once you've zeroed out the payroll. Because remember, once we run that step, the history file is created. Excuse me. So if you need to enter the information for the 1095Cs for employees, we have two ways that you can do that. You can either do it manually, one by one for each employee, or you can use our Excel sheet that we have for importing. So I'm going to show you the manual way first. So again, we need to go into the history file because that's where the forms print from. So I'm going to go to Payroll Employee History. And again, remember, 2024 will be available only after you run that zero out step, which is under Admin, Payroll, Year End. It's this one here, this backup year end employees. Running this zeroes everything out and creates the history file. So I'm going to go to employee history. All right. Now I'm going to go to the year-to-date totals tab. And we can see everything is grayed out here down at the bottom. This is where all of your information is. It's all grayed out, and that's because I haven't clicked this box yet that says print 1095C. Once I check this box, all of these fields become available for me to enter in the information. If you made a mistake, you can just uncheck it, and this will gray out everything again. There is this column here where it says all 12 months. That means if all across the entire year it was the same for this particular employee, the information, you can enter it in here in this first box and it will be automatically applied to the rest of the year. So as an example, I'm going to say 1A is my offer code. And you can see it's automatically filled in January through December using 1A. It's the same thing down here. I'm just going to put in $20 for employee share. And again, that goes through all the months. If you just needed something in, as an example, in March, you're more than welcome to do that. Let's say this was I don't know, 2A, oops, 2A, and April was 3A, then you can do that. Or again, if we go over here, I can say 2A, and that brings it all across the board. So this is the way that you can manually enter in the information. And over here on the right-hand side, it does give you the employee share totals that you can check for your reference, just to make sure everything is correct. If you have a large number of 1095C employees to report, again, we do have that option where you can export the data from Visual ContrAcct into an Excel file. We have an Excel file that we can share with you that you'll be able to modify and then import the file back into Visual ContrAcct so that you don't have to do this manual way of doing one employee at a time. If that is something that you need, just let us know and we can install it and set it up and show you how it works. Once you are ready to import that file back into VC, I'm just going to say no here. You're going to go to File, Payroll, and then 1095C Import. When you upload this file, it will then update all of the employee history records according to what you've entered in on the Excel sheet. You'll just want to make sure, again, that you select your correct tax year and that it's pointing to the correct Excel file. And again, we can help you with this if that's something that you would need. Once everything is set, you can then print the 1095C forms to paper and or the electronic filing. If you go to under reports, payroll, year end, we have the different options here. These here where it says forms, that means it's to paper, or you can select the 1095C electronic filing. If you are printing to paper, there is no pre-printed form, so you can just use a blank 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If you have selected the electronic filing, it will create a file for you and show you the path of where it was saved. And then you can upload that particular file to the website. And again, we have that information down here. The rest of our instructions have some helpful links that you're more than welcome to look at. Anything that's blue or underlined is a link that you can click on. We also have the due dates listed for each of the forms that you're more than welcome to just keep or add to your calendar as needed. But this is the last page of our instructions. So that will conclude our 2024 year-end webinar. And if you need any forms or if you have any other questions, please contact us at support@jobcost.com, or you can call into the office 630-355-8188. We will be closed December 25th and January 1st, but otherwise we are open from 8 o'clock until 5 Central Time. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you for watching. I hope everyone takes care and happy holidays.